Welcome back to the Path to Integrity training program for educators. As you might recall from the overview shown before, we have now reached what we refer to as Part 2, where you're going to learn more about the methodological approaches used in the Path to Integrity learning materials. One of the methods used is dialogue, which is what you're going to hear more about in the following session. So just to refresh your memory, we have just completed Part 1, during which you were introduced to the Path to Integrity project and program, and when we also outlined why research integrity is important. As mentioned before, I'm now going to take you through Part 2, where you're going to learn about the methods used in the Path to Integrity learning cards, which are, as you can see, dialogue, storytelling, and role play. We'll start with an elephant that is studied by individual blind people in order to understand it. The elephant stands for reality or truth, the blindness for the inability to recognize the full picture. The observation of a limited section, here a part of the body, leads to specific limited insights. The persons do not gain an understanding of the whole, and interrelations or cooperation of the body parts, the individual truths or realities. Reality can be perceived differently depending on the perspective. This leads to subjective or incomplete truth and understandings of reality that remain partial and limited. Where do you see a dialogue in the elephant? The totality of the elephant can be grasped when the individual blind persons talk to each other, enter into dialogue, and are open to the findings of the others. Path to Integrity is based on the widely shared assumption that dialogue is an important and effective method of learning and can help to strengthen research integrity. This is why this method, along with the storytelling and role play, is used in many learning materials. The word dialogue comes from the Greek, dialogos, and describes an explorative way to reach a shared understanding. Dialogue is to be distinguished from debate. A debate and a dialogue differ mainly in terms of their premise, goal, focus, and behavior of speakers. While debaters usually consider only one correct answer, especially their own, speakers in dialogue are open to many possible answers. In a debate, one wants to win, be right, convince. In dialogue, one wants to understand the perspectives. Debate focuses on a shortcoming or weakness, while dialogue is open to new things, exploring the values. And often debaters talk more than they listen, while in dialogue, listening is also crucial, without judging, but rather reflecting. The power of dialogue is obvious. A dialogue is an understanding-oriented communication, and therefore enables an inquiry into and understanding of processes that fragment and interfere. Dialogue partners can explore individual or collective presuppositions, ideas, beliefs, and feelings that affect their interactions. You can reveal patterns of incoherence there, where we usually avoid certain issues or where we insist on defending our opinions, even when they are not plausible. Dialogues also facilitate identifying how hidden values and intentions can control behavior, and how unnoticed cultural differences can clash without people realizing it. The following rules of rational dialogue can be used to facilitate dialogue. Be open to have a dialogue about accepting or rejecting norms. Make sure that everyone can participate in the dialogue. See each contribution to the discussion as a noteworthy argument. Share your prior knowledge when required and be prepared to discuss it. Do not call upon someone's prior knowledge when you have rejected it yourself as unacceptable. Are there stronger arguments? Don't stick to an opinion if there is better information. Don't use an ambiguous argument to convince someone. Remember that your social status does not replace making a good argument. Be ready to provide reasons for your statements if asked to do so. You can find further information on a dialogical learning setting in our handbooks. On the following slides, I'll present some examples on how to make a dialogue friendly and effective. First, I would like to give you tips, or so-called protocols, for an improved representation of interests in a dialogue. How do I verbalize what I have in mind? If you want to state, for example, your underlying assumptions and describe the data that led to them, you could say, "Here's what I think," or "Here's how I got there." Also give a reasoning and explain your conclusion. Encourage others to explore your model, your assumptions, and your data by saying, for example, "What do you think about what I just said?" If you're not clear about something, say, "Here's an aspect which you might help me think through." And even if you speak up for others, listen, keep an open mind, and encourage others to hold different views. You might say, for example, "Do you see it differently?" You see, it's about being aware of the other person when speaking, stating assumptions, describing what led to them, understanding that dialogue partners may have a different opinion. Such an approach is also necessary in the case of questioning. Ask others to make their thinking process visible. Guide others down the ladder of inference and find out what data they are operating from. What leads you to conclude that? Might be an appropriate question here. Or what data do you have for that? Instead of, "What's your proof for this?" use non-aggressive language by saying, for example, "Can you help me to understand your thinking?" Explore your dialogue partner's arguments as much as possible. How does this relate to your other concerns? And also explain why your question is related to your own concern. You could say, for example, "I'm asking you about your assumptions here because..." Does your dialogue partner have a point of view with which you disagree? Make sure, again, reproduce the arguments in your own words. If I understand you correctly, you are saying that offer your own views in an open manner. Have you thought of that? Then you could state any concerns and reasons for them. Have you considered the following points? You could point out that there may be other contexts that should be considered too. In dialogue, you can find yourself in a dead end. This is how you could solve this. Reflect on the thinking of both sides. Which point of view is clear to both of us? Where do we still lack information to prove it argumentatively? Look for information to move forward. What is the problem? What do we agree on? Where do we not understand each other? Remember that your dialogue partner's mental model may have another context. Do we have two different assumptions? Where are you coming from? Could be an example of how to verbalize this. Agreeing to disagree would not be a good end to a dialogue. One might say, "I don't understand what assumptions our disagreement is based on." The prerequisite in dialogue is always the willingness of both partners to engage in dialogue. For example, not to insist on their own point of view. That's it for dialogue. In the following presentation, we will talk about storytelling and role play.